And now I'd like to welcome to the program Sarah Ashton-Cirillo from the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who's in, near Chasiv Yar in one of the cities there. Hello, Sarah. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Don, and hello to the viewers of TVP World. It's good to be joining you today.
Now, you've made it there to the front lines of Konstantinivka area, Druskivka area. So what does it look like there compared to previous times, I guess, that you were, maybe the last time that you were there? How has the situation changed?
I actually served, sorry to cut you off, I actually served in this area. I served in Chasiv Yar directly during the time that Bakhmut was being contested before we went ahead and strategically redeployed from there. And so returning now to Konstantinivka and coming very close to Chasiv Yar, I can report that the troops I've spoken with, the folks I'm embedded with, the morale is much higher than what is being reported in what I would term the legacy media. The folks that I was working with yesterday from the 5th Assault Brigade, as one person told me, hope will never die, nor will their will to liberate all of the Donbass and all of Ukraine. And that came directly from one of the men in the 5th Assault Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine.
So now, Sarah, what about, because we've heard that the American ATACMS might be on their way to Ukraine as soon as the end of this week, how much of a game changer will that be for you and all the others on the front lines?
Well, we'll start with our conversation with TVP World that I joined you for last week, when we were wondering if the weapons would come, and we had great hope that they would. We're now seeing a tremendous change in the moral and psychological, this sort of psychosocial outlook of the armed forces of Ukraine along the front line, because now we understand that we've gotten our backup from the partners that had been long promised to us. And so we're ready to inflict tremendous damage upon the Russians that was only being held back by the lack of supplies that had not yet come in, with different weapon systems on their way to us. I don't want to be too specific. That's your job to speculate in the news media. It's our job to use the weapons. That I can tell you the Russians are going to be fleeing. The Russians are going to be engulfed in chaos and carnage at the hands of my colleagues in the armed forces of Ukraine.
Right now, as we talk about the situation in Chasiv Yar, I mean, if we look at some of the maps that show the movements of Russian troops, well, it seems that they're just kind of on the outskirts of the canal line there. Again, can you speculate? Are you seeing ammunition starvation? Is that still an issue there in the direct vicinity?
Strategically, I'm not at liberty to discuss what we're using and how we're using it. What I will say very clearly is that the armed forces of Ukraine will be soon deploying all of our resources and all of our assets along the entire front. And they will be deployed in a way that the Russians have not seen for some time.
Now, what about, is there any talk among you and the others who are there on the ground, any talk of an upcoming Russian spring offensive?
General Budanov mentioned that it's going to be a difficult upcoming month, but one that we will weather with the normal courage and normal strength that the world has come to see from the armed forces of Ukraine. So General Budanov just warned today that from mid-May until June, we can expect a comprehensive battle plan to try to be carried out by the Russian enemy, but one that ultimately will fail. We understand as soldiers and non-commissioned officers that we leave the planning to folks like General Budanov, Colonel General Siersky, and of course President Zelensky and the entire Stavka. Our job is to carry out their plans, and we will do so in a way that will disrupt the Russian invasion and ultimately lead to the liberation of Ukraine and the return to the country's 1991 borders.
Right now, I want to get back to the situation around Konstantinivka and Druskivka and all the way up there to Kramatorsk. Have you noticed an uptick in shelling of those areas as the Russians have gotten a little bit closer there in Chasiv Yar? Have they been striking those cities with a little bit more frequency?
Yesterday in Konstantinivka, I toured a kindergarten that had been destroyed 4 days before. Russia destroyed a kindergarten in Konstantinivka. I went there with members of the 5th Assault Brigade. We looked over the ruins. We talked about it. I also went and viewed some houses that have been destroyed recently. Ultimately, the Russian terrorism is creeping further west from the line of contact. However, we unfortunately have become used to Russia being a terrorist state, being a terrorist cabal. And ultimately, when Russia does things such as destroy a kindergarten in Konstantinivka just 5 days ago, we understand that Russia is carrying out Putin's plan of genocide against the Ukrainian people. And that's why we are so thankful to our American partners, our Polish partners, and others for supplying us with both the defensive means and offensive weapons to liberate Ukraine. So yes, we are seeing a creep towards the West, but something that will be repulsed and repelled in the coming weeks and months.
And I'm just going to follow up. Are there any plans right now, or are these underway? Are there any plans for evacuation of civilians from some of these areas closer, that are becoming closer and closer to the front?
The Ukrainian civilians that I engaged with yesterday on the road to Shazav Yar were, as many have seen for the past 2+ years and 10 years, full of this indomitable spirit that basically suggests they're not going anywhere. And knowing how strong-willed and strong-minded the Ukrainian people are, unlike what we're seeing along the border regions where the terrorism is absolutely horrific in Kharkiv Oblast, there is no forced evacuations of children or any others here at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about, I just want to go back because you mentioned this destroyed kindergarten and, of course, these and Russia's genocidal action. What is the humanitarian situation of the civilians that are still there?
Water is intermittent, electricity is intermittent. Air alarms, when they're available, depending on the city and the town, are constant. But again, the folks have become used to this sort of difficult situation at the hands of Russian terrorism, and they're saying enough is enough. They're not moving, and they're trusting in the armed forces of Ukraine to make certain that we repel the Russian enemy. And so it is very difficult. I'll repeat, intermittent water, intermittent electricity, constant air alarms when available, and yet the people are standing strong.
Right, right. Well, they never fail to do so. From all my time in Ukraine, that's one thing I definitely learned. Sarah Ashton-Cirillo from the Armed Forces of Ukraine, thank you very much for joining us today and giving us that update. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and stay safe.
Don and TVP World, thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Heroim Slava.